Welcome to Gulf War Side Effects, everyone. My name is John Schmitz. Kevin is out this evening with family. Most people know my co-host tonight, Wade. How are we doing tonight, Wade?
Absolutely fabulous.
Great, perfect. So tonight we are going to share our experience, our personal experiences, kind of right before and when we entered the service, and a little bit after, if we get to that point. When I say in the service, I'm referencing while we're actually in theater, a Desert Storm, Desert Shield, our experiences with that. Um, I'll start off and say I got out in 80, I believe it was 88, had a 1 year break in service and went back into the service in 89. I requested Germany, and of course, I was in I'll call it a sister battalion, a cross post in Karlsruhe, Germany, which was 79th Engineers, and 249th Engineers was the combat heavy engineer across base. And they had some empty slots. I was one of those chosen personnel. I was the combat engineer, was the umbrella term. I was construction is what we primarily did. Vertical, horizontal construction. Yes, we took care of the mines, and we had the capability of blowing up stuff and all that kind of crazy stuff. But so I backfilled that. I remember it being in the month of November when we were called up, and we deployed out of Karlsruhe, and we got there. It was in November, and to my knowledge, none of us had ever been in a desert platform before. And I know that because we had no real gear, and we didn't have an understanding of what the weather was going to be like when we got in theater. It was November. Well, I don't know. I'm going to take a guess. It had to be 70, 75 degrees when we got there. It was very comfortable. And I remember getting off the plane, and it was a concern of the higher ranks that we all started to hydrate ourselves. And I'm like, it's fine. The weather was beautiful. I didn't have an issue, but you know, we found our way to some stationing place, which was full. It was tent city. It was full of, I don't know if it was all active Army or National Guard or what, but we were there for, let's say, 2 weeks. That's the initial. How about yourself, Wade? How'd things go
I'm just
with you?
curious, what kind of aircraft did you fly over on when you went there?
Civilian. It was a civilian. It's funny you asked that. It was a civilian aircraft, because when I went on, they would just, as you come on, you start at the back and fill forward. And I happened to land by, I'll say, use the word luck loosely. I got a first class seat, and I'm going, this can't be good. I'm like, oh shit, and so great seat. I don't remember the flight at all. I remember one of the stewardess was somebody from my local area. So I'm in Germany, and this person was from here in Iowa. I remember that it was a guy, and I was like, okay, this is not going well. You meet somebody, you got a great seat, got great visibility flying over the Swiss Alps, and it's gorgeous. And I'm like, oh shit. So it was civilian aircraft.
No, I joined the Army Reserves and did a basic and AIT for infantry earlier, and I'd completed 3 years of that service and decided to go active duty. And that would have been February of 90. And I reclassed going on active duty. And they say, be careful what you ask for. And when I went to the recruiter, I had requested combat medic. I had to have airborne, and I wanted guarantee assignment at Fort Bragg. And I literally got everything I asked for. Combat medic school at Fort Sham, if anybody's ever been to Fort Sam Houston, was absolutely fabulous. Airborne school, 3 weeks at Fort Benning. I've been to Fort Benning a couple of times. Great. Got some blood wings going on down there. That was pretty cool. And off to Fort Bragg. And I was at reception all of about 3 hours before I got picked up by an infantry battalion because medics were in short demand. And I ended up at the 2nd of the 505th Parachute Infantry Regiment, 82nd Airborne, and I would have thought I was in heaven. And that would have been June of 90. From August of 90, we had been on DRF-1, coming off of the intensive training cycle. A lot of people hear about the 82nd Airborne. If the balloon goes up, the 82nd goes. And it's not a motto, but it is their main mission. They can literally be anywhere in the world with a full fighting brigade in 18 hours or less. It is literally the only unit in the entire U.S. military that has that capability. And we were, next thing I know, we're going down to the troop containment area, something I never heard of, troop containment area. And it was a pretty cool little area, old barracks, had MPs on the outside of the fencing patrolling around, which I was later to learn was the MPs were there to keep the troops inside the containment area.
Sure.
That's where we went, got issued live ammo. We got our grenades. So that's when everything started getting real. And I was amongst a platoon that went what they call advanced party for our battalion. And I flew over on a C-141, one platoon of guys, troop seats. We had
only one platoon?
What's that?
Only one platoon?
One platoon. We were the advanced party for our battalion going first.
Huh. Okay.
And you've seen a 141, I'm sure.
I have.
And so a deuce and a half, a water buffalo, and one platoon of guys. And I have some pretty cool pictures of that where we get loaded up. We're leaving Pope Air Force Base, and I'm walking around, and all I'm doing is handing out Benadryl to everybody. And so, we take that flight, mid-air refueling. We had a stopover in Spain. And the next thing we know, I'm landing in Saudi Arabia. And you were talking about the temperature, and that just kind of brought it back. 120 degree plus.
Oh, shit.
Feeling like the devil's armpit. And yes, there was just nothing but cases of bottled water. And drink. And from there, we ended up going to a place. There was a town called Safwa, and we were a little bit west of that, but it was a brand new Air Force barracks complex, Saudi, that had never been lived in yet. And we basically commandeered it. And it was the nicknamed or named Champion Maine. And then that's where a majority of the 82nd troops, as they were coming into country, they all went to Champion Maine. So that's where I ended up, and that's where we based out of for the next 4 months. And we left there to watch the desert, do desert training. But then we actually did have a place to come back to after training. I won't complain. Prior to crossing over in the border, coming up to January, we did have a decent place to come back to get cleaned up, take showers. So yeah, that was my initial.
So you went out in theater and you were doing training.
Yeah, we had to go out. I remember we weren't even there a day or two, and we did it was about a 1 mile road march. That was our acclimation, and we had severe heat casualties, just basically walking around the complex. Again, in the middle of the day, 120 degrees, taking a little walk around, a lot of heat casualties. So, it took a lot of acclimation. But a lot of time, there was times we'd go out to the desert and we would literally just go to the desert and sit and get used to the heat. And I call them there weren't palm trees. There were plants out in the desert. I'm sure you remember, like plants, and we'd call it chasing shade. And we were making shade with our ponchos and then moving it around, basically survival techniques, just basically trying to stay out of the sun, drinking. The medics were running around giving a lot of IVs, during those training times. So it was interesting. It was, that was not part of the military doctrine at that time. In the desert, that was completely new to everybody. So we had a lot of time to train, a lot of time to read.
Yeah. So we sat there I honestly am not 100% sure. We talked. Well, I don't know. It was Dahran. I don't think it was Bahrain because I think Bahrain. You and I talked briefly a little bit about this. I don't know if that my geography isn't real good. I think that's an island. I'm not 100% sure. But anyway, wherever we were at, yes, they called it two. We were there, I don't know, let's say 2 weeks. So later than you guys. But yes, the concern was hydration, get get climatized. And I'm like, it's like if you want to call it perfect weather, it was perfect weather. There was nothing going on. We did nothing while we were there. All just eat, drink, read a book. We had nothing going on. I mean, when it was time to move forward, we got on some civilian bus. Of course, there's no. It wasn't, there was no climate, there was no heating or air on this bus that I was aware of. I mean, I remember the bus ride because we were freezing our asses off. It was cold as shit. And when I think of desert, I don't think of cold. I think of heat. And, it was bloody cold. And I remember moving forward. I don't, I'm going to assume we were just going to wherever our equipment was at. I don't have you have a pretty good recollection of where you're at. I did not because I did not know where we were at. I didn't have a map. I mean, I was just going where they told us to go, right? And we didn't really. I don't remember. I remember because we're combat engineers, so we had the ability to seek out mines, and we were prepared for whether we had to deploy minefields, blow up minefields, that sort of thing. And I remember they made a structure and said, okay, if we have to do this, if we have to detect mines, this is how it's going. And we're trained for it, right? But we're human beings. It scared the shit out. I mean, I was scared to death because I was like, holy shit. Okay, now, like you said earlier, we're getting real. Okay. And, of course, most typically, the lowest rank goes in front and it kind of, you're in a V position going backwards and, literally probing for a mine, which, I mean, we're in the sand, so you have no idea. I mean, the Marines and them that were way up in front of us and some of the other combat engineers, I don't know whether they had to do that. We did not end up having to probe for mines. We were just training for it, but, that kind of plays with a person's mind, whether you're trained for it or not. Like you said, oh yeah, and I remember you were talking about the munitions that we were getting, right? The ammo and everything, and we were with the big red one. Our 249th engineers were assigned to the 1st Infantry Division, which is out of Fort Riley, Kansas. Big red one, and we're like, I remember them telling us, they started handing out the ammo, which not a big deal. Then they started handing us grenades, and I'm like, oh shit, I'm like, holy crap, I'm a freaking, okay, yeah, I know how to use it, but my mind isn't worried about necessarily having to use it. My concern with some stupid bastard's going to drop a mine or drop a freaking grenade and kill me. That's what I'm thinking, because that isn't something we had ever done in the past. We had never ran around with dummy ones or any of that shit. And I'm like, holy crap. I mean, but you said you were giving them, right?
Right.
You said that was a combat load for you.
Yeah. And everybody always says, oh, medics, non-combatant. Well, that's not true. And that's not the case. I carried a M16A2. I carried a full combat load. I carried 2 grenades. I did not carry a law. I had my medic bag. My medic bag weighed in right about 40 pounds, when it's fully loaded, in addition to my pack. We're light infantry. I'm sure, and I'm not dogging on you because that's just what we do, but I'd always dog on you. But, how
that's all good.
You guys pretty much are like, if you can't truck it, you screw it. Light infantry, we walk everywhere.
Yeah.
So
right.
You carry everything on your back. And that's what it was. Everything that I had, I took with me when I left Bragg, and, and when you're on DRF1, you are packed and ready to go. You're on a 2-hour alert, constantly when you're on DRF1, and everybody remembers the pagers. Everybody had a pager, and when they say 2 hour alert, that's 2 hours from the time that the call goes out. That's not 2 hours when you get it. So you might get the call out, and you might still only have 30 minutes to get back and be in formation. And there was plenty, not counting Desert Storm, but there was plenty of times that we would actually get called out, and we were on a plane flying somewhere, and we had no idea if it was real or not. I mean, so it was in an 80-second. It's constant, go like that. But so, I mean, what I had was you put it on your back. If you can't carry it, you don't have it.
So in that respect, yes, engineers are kind of spoiled in that because of our MOS, because of our jobs.
Well, we had engineers attached to us. I mean,
no, but what I'm saying is, as an infantryman, it's because when I got out the first time, I was part of a National Guard outfit, which they didn't have my MOS. They put me as a supply sergeant, and I was like, okay. And I was like, I went to the field with these guys, and I'm like, hell no. I mean, because I wasn't used to that. I'm like, okay, we would make stuff for ourselves to be comfortable, as you did, but we had more stuff, So that brings me to a good point. So when you were there, my experience while I was there, I remember we were always moving. I just put up a picture on a Facebook page. It showed me in a pup tent, had our 5-ton dump, had some heavy junk over here. I have no recollection of that picture at all. I'm like, I stayed in a GP Tiny. I didn't even recall that. None, zero. I don't remember it at all. But I was like, when we needed something, all we had to do is ask supply. Boom, it was yours right now. No questions asked. What do you need? Here you go. Whereas when you're in garrison, what do you got to do to get something?
Pull teeth, bribe them.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Now it's kind of, I'd be curious how now if you're a Navy personnel like Kevin, I assume because you're on a ship, whatever you got's already there, you can get it. But still, that supply daddy has got to give you whatever it is you're after. So I don't know if that's the same mentality as you and I. In garrison, you play bloody hell getting something. Time of war, here you go. They can't hand it to you fast enough. You don't have to sign out no freaking requisition paper, any of that bullshit. But like you said, always got to make sure you're buddies with the supply sergeant, the mess sergeant, the male personnel.
Always have friends with the cooks. Gotta be friends with cooks.
Hell yeah, and we ate good. We had fun. I wish I could remember the sergeant name. She was a phenomenal cook. She was great. Yeah, I can't remember names, like I said, because I was put into this unit. You said you were with your unit, 3 months before deployment?
It was about 3 months. So I really didn't know anybody. I wasn't tight with too many people. And as a medic, you get quote unquote loaned out. So I went directly when I got there. I went directly to a line, an infantry company, and then I got assigned to an infantry platoon. And I stayed with that platoon literally my whole career, that company. But that platoon I stayed with. The only time I ever went and checked in with my medical platoon is when I needed something, So I stayed with them, and my medical platoon was over here doing their thing. And I had literally little to no contact with them, and unless I was in trouble, then I had a lot of they'd call me and I got promoted over there or whatever.
Did you get in trouble?
Oh yeah, I got over the years. I got in quite a bit of trouble. But yeah, I had a great platoon daddy. But yeah, but once we moved north, and it was right after Christmas, early January. I remember we were there for Christmas. We might have been there for New Year, but that's when they moved us north. And that's when we moved into a tent city, and that's when we started loving on engineers. They built us the outhouses. Everybody's seen pictures of the infamous 3-stall outhouses. With the toilets, build
them.
Those. The showers, the wood showers. We've got to show Kevin some of those pictures. But yeah, the wood showers, a 5-gallon water jug. Someone's going to take up there and pour into it, and then you're down below. And
you guys didn't have water. You didn't pull a string and have the water come down. You have to use 5-gallon jugs.
somebody had to fill it.
Yeah, you guys are infantry.
Yeah. So I mean, but to get one shower in a week, you were doing good,
Oh,
and
yeah.
and I mean that's all the water we had. I mean for showers. And
What
so
was it? What? Let me ask you this: when you showered, did it lather or did it stick? Because the first time I showered, it was freaking ocean water. Guess what, buddy? Salt water don't lather.
water, yeah. Yeah, no, I don't even. I just remember that you pull the water, you lather up, and then you have to pull the water to make sure you have enough left. But that's all you got was that 5-gallon. You're done. So you better
Was
make
it
sure
ever heated water? Did you ever have heated?
Well, no, yeah, from the sun. One guy goes up and
we had.
No,
we
hell
had
no.
pot belly heaters heating up our damn water.
Oh
man.
God, no, ain't no damn pot belly heater. And no. And the thing is, I mean, after a while, everybody you can't smell the next guy because you all smell the same anyway. I want to quote it, but I want to say it was. We ended up going. I believe it was 34 days without a shower.
Oh God, you all right.
And that was like going into February, and then before we got pulled back out into March. But it was like 34 days, and there was no shower.
Well, we had one guy. It was an E5. Here again, I don't remember the guy's name. He made it a point to make it known that he was not taking a bath. He was going to go the duration without freaking washing. I'm like, you nasty ass, wash. And I thank goodness he was here. I was on the when we were in the GP medium, I was on the other side of the GP medium, and I was really grateful because that son of a bitch stunk. Again, we didn't always have tents, but most of the time had tents.
No, Kevin Simon, he wants to know about the disposing of the human feces in the burn barrel. Now you might recall that. Now I have to tell Mr. Kevin Simon, being the combat mag that I am, I would be the supervisor for that because that fell within my purview of responsibility. Now I would not personally do that. I'd have to supervise that because that's what I do. Now, even though I'm a younger, I get to supervise that. That's a Joe's job. Joe gets out there and does that.
You never once had to do it.
No, because I'm part of sanitation. That falls under combat medic. So I had to supervise. So I have to go out there.
You didn't actually do it.
No, I don't do that. That's Joe's job.
Bullshit. Okay, so here's the deal. We made those damn shacks. I don't remember how many we made, but yes, then you have to dispose of the human waste. And yes, Kevin, did you stir the shit? Answer to that question is yes. And I remember I avoided. And at the last, I don't know, it was the last, let's say, week or so, Staff Sergeant comes up and I don't remember if I made E5 while I was there or not. I don't know, but he goes, "It's your turn." And I'm like, "Oh hell!" I'm like, "Okay." So yeah, I don't remember. It was a mixture of diesel and gasoline, and you're trying to stay out of the wind.
It don't matter because when you move, it's going to come get you. And,
it's nasty.
And I remember those the outhouses, the wood outhouses. The engineers come in, and we didn't have the pits up north. We didn't have the burn barrels. They just dig a big hole. They just dig a big pit, and they put the house right on top of the pit. Right?
Oh.
Well, then somebody said, "Watch out for the vipers, because the vipers will get in there." And I'm like, "You got to be." I remember going in there at nighttime. And I'm hearing something down in there. I never once ever went back in there. And then people are going to say, "So what did you do?" Yes, I went out in the desert, just like everybody else did, in the desert from there on out. And we have this thing I'll have to bring in next time called an E-tool, an entrenching tool. And Joe can be very ingenious with that.
I know what an E-tool is. I carried an E-tool. All right.
Absolutely.
We had it. But we had the half of 50-gallon drums. We didn't ever have to. It never was straight down into the fucking sand. Not that I remember. And then they come, they fill it in, and then they just move the outhouse over, and the engineers just dig a pit.
Or we had a chair
regular folding metal chair. We cut a hole out and took it out where, off to the side, did her number. And I do remember this. I'm out way off in the distance with this freaking folding chair doing my number. And I felt a bunch of wind. I'm like, what the hell? A freaking had to have been a cobra. All of a sudden come up behind me and sitting there hovering and looking right at. They're pointing at me. I'm like, what the hell? They're pointing and laughing. You sons of bitches.
Well, what about so we get to, and this is something we had talked about, but so we get to January,
Right.
and I don't remember the exact date, but the air war started. And so the air war started. We got 30 days of air war, and President Bush, I praise the man. So we have B-2s, B-52s, we got the Navy. And I remember laying in the desert, and you could lay there in the desert and then you just see them. You just see the planes flying over. You could see some of the rounds from the Navy ships flying over. And you just sit there and you just sit there and listen. And, maybe 10, 15, 30 minutes later, you just hear boom, 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 boom. I mean, just constantly. So 30 days of bombardment, and all we thought was, I wouldn't want to be on the receiving end of that,
Exactly.
And which was, that was, I mean, obviously Bush didn't think of that, but I'm glad the generals did, because that was a huge morale booster, knowing what we were supposed to be going into.
Yeah. Now, see, were you aware, Wade, were you made aware prior to when the actual initial assault started? Were you guys made aware of that?
Of what?
I mean, you were infantry, but I mean, so for us, when the air campaign, I'll phrase it like that, started, when everything started shooting off, were you aware of that moment? Were you made aware prior or no?
Oh yeah. They said that the air campaign, because you know what it's like. Like we had been there since August. We were tired. We were frustrated. We had fights breaking out amongst ourselves. I mean, we just wanted to go home. And if that just meant going across the border and getting this going, and let's just get it on, let's go. And that's where the attitude that we were at. I mean, it was, we just want to go home. We want to get this fight over and done with, and let's go home.
Sure.
And so, the air campaign, and it's just, I can still remember the platoon sergeant in charge of me, and he's like, it's not going to be much longer. It's not going to be much longer, And so, I mean, and it wasn't. It really wasn't.
See, and I don't remember, again, like I said at the beginning, my recall of what happened and when it happened. I remember, so we were putting down, I want to say it was called M9 matting, which was big squares. I don't know, let's say they were pretty good size. Maybe couldn't have been maybe 10 foot by 10 foot, maybe bigger than that. And they were connected with a piece of aluminum rod. And we were putting these down. We were putting them down so the helicopters could land on, so they weren't getting as much sand in the rotors and stuff like that. And we were putting down football fields worth of this stuff. And I remember doing a lot of that. I remember building a lot of the crappers, putting up some makeshift camps, and I can't even call it a camp for those that for when the Iraqis were surrendering. You and I talked about that,
right?
And the amount of the men that just wanted to surrender. When they would start to surrender, we just saw them coming, hands all up in the air. All those guys wanted food and water. Of course, you couldn't understand shit. We didn't speak the language, and they were, they knew they were defeated. Because it was clear victory. They didn't have a chance, snowball's chance in hell, because we were beyond. I don't know. Think of the largest thing you can. We would completely overwhelm them.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
They had no chance.
Them. And then the armor had already gone ahead of the ground troops. The armor had already gone ahead. And then we were the follow on. And when they say mopping up, that's literally what it was mopping up. I mean, to the point of, I don't want to say feel sorry, because I don't really feel sorry, but you had to have some kind of empathy for them. Where they're just coming out of the spider holes, you know, and you have to check every spider hole you come upon, and you found bags, and you found bags of uniforms, but they were civilian clothes in those bags that they changed into, and just started walking on the highway.
See, now I didn't see any of that. I didn't see that. All the people we saw were in uniform.
We got plenty of people in uniform, but if you found a bag full that had uniforms in the bag, they had already changed and started walking. They didn't want to like get caught, if you will. You know, and if they're civilians, you can't just, you know, they're military. You don't really care. You just let them go. Big deal.
Right.
You know,
right. Well, at that point, they're no threat to you. You know that. And, you know, as we were moving forward, I don't know if I was describing it to you the other day when we were talking or what. I remember going through, you know, there was quite a bit of talk about the berm that supposedly Saddam had built up, you know, which was, it was 4.5, 5 feet tall tops.
Yeah.
And I remember driving through that in our 20-ton dumps and all of our equipment, because we were transporting everything. And I remember going down, looking out the back. I was in the back of the truck looking out and seeing all these tanks, the Canadians, you know, the French, the German. I mean, literally just lined up rows of tanks. And I remember just thinking, thank God they're on our side, because you're dead. If you're on the other side, obviously you and I shared, there was a lot of, you know, what was it? The arsenal that hit the tanks, that heated,
the depleted uranium rounds.
Thank you. Yeah. Phosphorus rounds and stuff like that. When they hit, you know, it like cooks everything. You know, these people are killed. The bodies just, I mean,
they're incinerated. They're not blown apart.
They're just gone. And we were at that point. I think at that point we had GPS. Because I think when we had our guest on last week or week before, whatever it was, he was saying that they got their GPS when they're in country. That's, you and I were talking. That's when GPS became a thing.
Yeah, it was a great testing ground for it.
Yeah. And so we would have to mark the graves, try and dig some sort of a grave for every body that we found, put it in, mark it, and go to the next. And that was one of our tasks that we had to do along the way. That is not a fun task. That is not something we were, I mean, I don't know that there's a person alive. I mean, your job and my job were very different, you know. We're very well trained at what it was we were supposed to do. We knew what we needed to do and how to do it. And we didn't need to be given a lot of directives when we're doing it. But, you know, you do what you're told. There's a chain of command for a reason. You know, you don't sit there and question everything you're told. You just do it, you know. Sometimes there's a bit of conversation if need be, but I don't know about yours, but in our case, like you were telling your staff sergeant said, you know, because you guys were getting unruly and frustrated and wanting to go. Let's go. Let's kick some ass. Like you said, let's get the hell back home. And my time, I think it went pretty quick. I think because we were never not busy with the exception of the first 2 weeks. Everything other than that, but you guys had obviously a lot of lag time.
A lot of lag time. I mean, a lot of training time.
If you ain't, yeah. What is the saying? If you ain't training, I don't know. There's some saying there. I can't remember what it was, but I mean, and then at the end, when we won, and at the end, it almost happened so quickly in my mind. Well, you said 100-hour war, right?
100 hours.
That, you know, and it was like, wow, okay, that was super quick. Now it's time to go home. We went to KKMC, again, big city, but at this time it was, when did we leave? We flew out and it was May. We left in May. We got there in November. I think we left in May. And, you know, it rained like bloody hell while we were there. It snowed while we were there.
Yeah.
And then it got hot as the son of a gun right before we left. And How was it when? Go ahead.
Oh, when we were still sitting up in Iraq, still doing clearing mission. I think it was Talil Airfield. It was our final objective that we went to, and that's where the rainstorm came in, and that was post Kamasia, because once we hit Kamasia, did our thing there, and kept moving south to Talil, and then that we ended up getting flown out. But right before that was when we had hurricane type, not like our hurricane, like our severe, but it was a severe rainstorm, and we were inside of a blown out train station that had run through the airfield, and just the pictures I got from there. I mean, we got half beards going on, hands in your pocket. We look like a bunch of hobos in there. I have a picture from the day we landed, which was August 20th, and then pictures from there, and they're side by side in the photo album. And it's just, you have one picture of STRAC troops arriving in country, and then these other pictures of just a bunch of hobos. And so we ended up getting flown out by the 101st. Airborne, and they airlifted us out and took us back. I was actually back in country, back to the United States on April 1st. I mean, our turnaround time was quick. I think we ended up leaving Iraq. It was the end of March. I remember I just found a letter from my daughter she used for a project, and I think it was dated March 18th, and we were still sitting in Iraq. And I remember writing to my mom. I wrote it to my mom that I think they forgot about us.
Really?
They didn't forget about us. I thought, being a young troop, I thought they forgot about us. But yeah, so
of course,
so from like March 18th, they got us back, cleaned up, new uniforms, and back to the United States in that short amount of time.
Wow, that's super quick. I remember. I remember being prior to flying out. I don't remember the flight home. I remember the bus trip from the airport back to Karlsruhe. Out of the blue, I got a nosebleed. And I remember first sergeant looks back, he goes, "Oh, the time to get him a nosebleed there, Schmitz." And I'm like, Yeah, Top. I know. I don't know why. I had never gotten a nosebleed before in my entire life that I recall. And I mean, it was it just coincidence? Who knows? I don't have any idea. But when I got, we got there, we got off the bus, or when you got off the plane, when you landed, did you have
huge celebration?
People,
huge.
Yeah. Did you have that?
Yeah. Huge.
Yeah.
Thousands of people, and yeah. I mean, we brought a civilian plane home that landed at Pope, and so I mean, it was announced obviously we were coming home. I didn't have anybody there, but there was, everybody else was saying. And then we had it ended up being a battalion brigade formation, safety briefing, released, and as sad as it sounds, after a couple phone calls. All the single guys were straight to the strip joints. And I mean, but that's Joe, man. I mean, I was gone 9-10 months. I'm we're single. We're heading, that's where we're going.
Yeah, and it's not like you had women in your outfits that you could enjoy a little time with, right?
No, we had no women, and that's fine.
Yeah.
We headed straight, where the cold beer, just where the cold beer was at, and that's where we headed. And I just think that's what I remember, just formation, change, gone.
Now, how long were you guys allowed once you were released? How long were you guys let off before you had to come back? Okay, let's start going back into garrison mode and start training again.
We ended up getting a quick 2-week leave, came back, and we were right back at it. I mean, it was like, and then we had months, because you have to jump every 3 months to stay current. So we had jumps that we had to make up to keep our pay. So we had jumps to make up. We had training to keep going. So I mean, it was right back at it, and that's the one thing. I mean, for me, and this is just for me personally. I mean, it really made me a strong person mentally, I think. I mean, there's a lot of things that have happened between then and now. And I've seen a hell of a lot worse things in the Army than Desert Storm. You know, we went and saw and did. Desert Storm, I got my Bolo badges. You know, I got my participation trophies. I love it. I love wearing. I love being part of the 82nd Airborne. That's a big part of me and my identity. But you know, it just made me a strong individual, and I think it made me very strong mentally as well. And there's things that happen. John, you remember the derecho that we had in Iowa?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
We lived through the derecho. Nobody ever hears about it because nobody died. But I went 12 days without electricity in the month of August in Iowa. It didn't faze me one bit. All I thought is, if I can do this in the desert, this is nothing. You know, and I relate a lot of things that I've been through. I mean, like you and I talked about the other day, there was no crazy, I'm getting shot at by 1,000 guys and I'm shooting back at 1,000 guys. It didn't happen, you know, but the thought of it was there. The potential was there. I was ready to go. They were ready to go. It just, unfortunately for the Air Force and the Navy, they took care of the heavy work for us, you know?
But, and
so being able to,
I was just,
go ahead.
No, I was just saying, you know, when you got home, big celebration. When I got home, I got off the bus. My wife, she was really pregnant. She gave birth to our son 10 days later.
Really pregnant.
And so, you know, I went home. I mean, we lived off post in a very, very nice, comfortable place there in Karlsruhe. The Germans, I love their buildings and how they're built and the marble floors and all that. But so my wife gave birth, and it wasn't that long after I was sent. You know, I don't remember how long we were given off. You know, I do remember we went from Karlsruhe to Wildflicken, Germany, and it was from Wildflicken that so this was in 91. You know, after the war, things moved kind of quickly, but I went to BNOC, so I must have not made E5 when I was in in the desert. I don't recall, but anyways, you know, and yeah, so my life, I had a wife to go home to, and so things were different. Trying to raise a kid, you know, it's not like, you know, we're overseas. It's not like we have our parents to say, "Hey, what's going on?" Because, you know, we don't have these things like today. But you know, so that's what it was like for us. And so we're gonna have to carry on more in another conversation. I wasn't for sure how long it was. I mean, because we haven't talked really about how it was when we got back home, and I think we'll talk about that in the after the show.
Sure.
But this was interesting because I learned some things from you. It was because all of our situations based on your MOS and what branch you're in were different, you know.
But very similar because like ours is very similar because being in the same is going to be different than like Kevin in the Navy, you know. Yeah. But you know, we can talk about being in the desert and, you know, going poop in the desert, worrying about the scorpions or the vipers. You know, Kevin will never understand that, nor would he probably even want to understand that. But you know what I'm saying? So, you know, it's relatable. But we'll just have to share some pictures with Kevin.
Yeah. So yeah, I just yeah, we'll have to share some pictures and we'll get them together, and next time we have this discussion, we'll share some of that. So I want to thank everybody for tuning in. I learned something about Wade. I'm sure he maybe learned something about what we did. We all respect one another. We enjoy jabbing at one another because that's kind of what we do. But I want to thank all of our listeners, people who are able to listen, people who are watching. We appreciate everything you do. Please like and subscribe. It helps us to share the information with other veterans that need the help, need a conversation. So that being said, everyone have a good night. Thank you so much, Wade, for coming on. Greatly appreciated. And we're going to be going into the after the show. Thank you, everyone.